my name's Eva and I'm one of the Digital Skills Officers at Education Scotland. I've been in the team here now about I think this is my 9th year, but my background is early learning and childcare. I was a nursery nurse in West Lothian for many years, and then when things changed a wee bit, I became an early years officer. In the last sort of year or two, I have worked with both of our guest presenters. So I have met with the two lovely teams in Clackmannashire that I'm just about to introduce you to, and also with Helen from Haddington Primary School. Helen's the head teacher there, so I'm not going to give you any spoilers. I'm not going to say anything about what they're about to show you, but I would just like to thank them so much for coming along to support this session. Now, I mentioned on the sign-up, some of you might have already came along, some of you might have watched the recap, but we have a lovely sort of pre-session that was hosted by Nikki Buchan from Natural Learning. She joined the call all the way from South Africa that day to present to us and gave a really lovely account of based on one of her books about exploring natural connections with light, reflection and shadow, and it was a really magical session. So if you've not managed to see it, or if you've maybe never had your hands on her book, I do recommend watching this session, because some of the things that I talk about today will be in relation to things that Nikki has said as well.
Does anyone recognise this image? It's the cover image from the recently published Play, Vision and Action Plan for 25 to 30. It talks about online play, digital play, and how it can help to enable opportunities for children to practice teamwork, to improve social skills and problem solving. And this really echoes with what UNICEF recognises as essential elements of the skills a child requires for school, work, life, and how digital literacy is a hugely growing part of any approach to skills development. And what does our national guidance for early years tell us about playing and learning with technology? Well, it highlights the importance of learning both with and through technology, the cause and effect of learning, but also how that technology can help us to solve problems and express meaning. It also talks about unique learning experiences. So, for example, in a response to a child's interest, say about sharks, the technology can extend that through being able to watch how sharks move through the ocean. And it can also help children to then gain a better understanding of size and speed. It helps us to draw on children's own knowledge gained at home or out with the setting, but then spark possible lines of development in a response to the children's own interests. And we're going to see lots of that coming up shortly from our guest presenters.
And before we sort of get into all the materials, let's think about your role. So Nikki Buchan in her session kept reminding us about the importance of the adult. Okay, and the adult facilitating inquiry. Sometimes we say nothing, sometimes we might gently provoke, and sometimes we'll maybe extend a wee bit with it. Oh, I wonder what that, I wonder how, I wonder if. So keep these sorts of things, these questions in mind as we go on. Also keep this in mind too. Okay, technologies as a language. So thinking about what Realising the Ambition said about creating those, virtual experiences, things that we couldn't do without the technology. You think about it as emphasising the connectedness between children's imagination and the real world. So how can digital technology help us to do that?
Yes, I'm Katie McNeil. I'm the Deputy across Park and Menstrie ELCs, and joining me today will be Michelle Mackey, the Deputy of Menstrie ELC, Lauren McGill, one of our early years educators, and Romy Masterson, another early years educator. First, we're going to kind of have a chat around Menstrie ELC's journey with this technology and how we've used it to be a part of our learning and teaching practices every single day. And then we're going to move on to Park ELC, and we'll show very much the same and look at some journeys around how we've used it within our learning and teaching.
So hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I'm acting deputy here at Menstrie ELC. So we attended training with Eva. The whole team attended it along with Park ELC, and we found it so inspiring that we had a look at our whole space within the nursery after that to try and make sure that digital technologies were embedded throughout. And that went along really well with our STEM award that we were going for at the time as well. So it really helped us to think beyond the box after our training with Eva. So the photos that you're going to see now, we have developed a space within the nursery that is purely for digital technologies. So although they're used throughout the nursery, there is a space in the nursery setting that is just for digital technologies. So unfortunately, Danielle, who is taking the lead on that space, she couldn't be with us tonight, so she sends her apologies. So Danielle has set up a lovely space where children are free to come and access technologies on a daily basis. We did find that before our training with Eva, our iPads were used mostly by staff rather than the children, and the main purpose were to take photos. Part of our documentation approach, we take lots of photos in the nursery, but the children weren't actually accessing the iPads. So with a little help from Eva, we have set up the area so that they can use iPads daily. There's iPads dedicated for children, and they have QR codes up on the walls so that they can just scan the QR code independently. This, what you're seeing here, this is our big screen. So that was moved around quite a lot in the area until we set up the digital space, and we couldn't, oh, and Martin, sorry, Eva, yeah, Martin did our training too. We couldn't really find a space for it, and to be honest, staff, along with myself, we didn't really know how to use the screen properly. But now that we've got our own space and we've got Danielle taking the lead on it, the children are using it so much better. They're using it independently. They're able to access games, apps. This is them using it to draw on it. And it's helping develop literacy skills, numeracy skills with the help of the digital technologies. There's also B-bots and robots that Danielle's got. This is the B-bots here that the children are using. So this is them developing a pathway for the B-bots to go through, and the children are able now to program the B-bots independently. You can see in the background, it's got the signs for the B-bots, and then the QR codes are next to it. So that's what the children use to access games with the iPads. And if we can do all of that now and develop those skills now, then hopefully they'll go on to primary 1 and beyond, being able to use digital technologies independently. This is a wee video of Miller using the robot that he's so it's coding. This is a coding robot, and he's used it to program it. So if Kerry, you can press play, hopefully it'll work. So you can see that Muller is able to do that completely independently. The staff, Danielle, is in that area just to support and to document the learning that's going on. But the children, we have been on a journey like Haddington, and it took us a while to get there. But the children are so independent now in using all the technologies within the area. They're confident learners using a variety of technologies, and it is definitely enhancing numeracy and literacy. As well as this space, the digital technologies are used throughout. So I've got Lauren and Romy here with me, who are going to speak a little bit more of other areas in the nursery. So Lauren, I think you're up first.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an area that we've developed, and we've used a lot of kind of different technologies throughout this area just to enhance the children's experiences. We mostly wanted to create interesting and immersive spaces through using technology. Through a range of stimuli and provocations in the environment, the children were able to fully express themselves creatively and allowing their ideas, thoughts and feelings to come to life. A little bit on these slides here, that's they were making their own puppet show. And the boys and girls had actually made up their own story, and they were able to tell the story through shadow. So that was one of that's kind of how my shadow group kind of started. This was like a 1.5 year long project that we've been working on. It was actually until the children went off to school. This is a wee video here of Amy, and she was she had made her own individual story. This was her butterfly, and it's just going to show you here how she's, Katie, if you can just play that a wee minute then. So that was just, if you see the background there, that was a laptop connected to one of the projectors, and Emmy had picked her own background that she wanted, and it was a butterfly flying through the trees. So you can see that the children are just fully invested. They're totally immersed in their learning and their play. And Michael here he made this crocodile out of clay. And he picked a setting that was, he was going through the water. So here we're using creating beautiful and immersive experiences for the children to develop their storytelling and creative skills through reflection and movement. Just move on to the next one, Kerry, thanks. So here you're going to hear my voice. I'm the narrator of the story, and the boys and girls are telling their story through their shadows. So here the children had worked together to create their own story, and they all had their own individual characters, and they made it out of cardboard. And that was them just kind of retelling their story, and that got shared with their families and all their peers. That was like their shadow movie that they called it. So yeah, they absolutely loved it. They loved watching it back as well. The person recording was actually one of our other children, and that was their role. They didn't want to be part of the shadow story, but they wanted to be the one to video it. So, you know, it's just everyone had their own individual roles within it. So yeah, in this next slide, this is just a wee example of using an overhead projector, and this was just some coloured sand just for some children to develop their early mark making skills, and as well as just you can just see how powerful that image is, just to see, like, there was some children like to practice their name or just practice drawing pictures, and then it was able to be reflected onto the wall as well for them to see. And here there's just another wee example of them using overhead projector again for their mark making, but also using torches and different materials just to put different reflections and shadows onto the wall. And yeah, it's been lovely. I just want to say as well, oh sorry, can I just say, Katie, quickly?
You're all right, you're all right.
Overall, the training's hugely impacted our practice. It's highlighted the importance of creating interesting spaces and experiences using a different digital technology to follow children's interests and encourage curiosity and wonder to enhance their learning. Right, that's thanks.
So we're going to move on to Romy now, and Romy's going to talk a wee bit about her stones. So this is a learning group that's been established through Children's Interests, and Romy's going to talk about how digital technologies have supported this.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just following on from Lauren and Michelle, this is a learning group that was established in August, and this is a learning group that have a big focus on creating large-scale landscapes with stones, pebbles, sea glass and different tiles. So a group of children get together, they decide what they want to make. For a little bit of context here, this was a rainbow being made in a beach scene. So you can see it's very purposeful, very contained, and the children have a lot of intention with what they make here. How I've managed to incorporate digital technology with this is it's now fully documented digitally, which I've not had the confidence to do before. I now fully document on the iPad or through PowerPoint or through pictures the children take. So context for this slide here was another beach scene. This is a photograph taken by some of the children, and we've used the projector to create sunshine on the landscape. So again, using projectors, different technologies, just to layer on top of what the children are already doing. And again, one of the biggest things I took away from the training was using the technology we already have. So using the iPads in a more intelligent way, just using the features that are already on there. So here I'm using the magnifier setting, and one of the children have taken this photo and turned what's about a 3-inch model, which now looks like a pyramid. So it does enhance their imagination. It helps them tell a story through what they're making. And on the next slide shows a time, another couple scenes here. This was a pond scene. And one of the children remarked that when they make a landscape, they want to be in the photograph. So they want to interact with the scene. So we're using that with the iPads, using different photography techniques. And that was a little rain cloud somebody had made. Another feature of the iPad, which I'd never used before, was the time-lapse feature for video. So if you just play that, Carrie, this was a 30-minute experience that has been condensed down into 30 seconds, which shows like the perseverance of what one of these experiences look like. And we've agreed as a group, a learning group, that each time a scene is made, that we take it as a time lapse. The children love to see it. It gives them more ideas for next time, and they love seeing the scene come to life quite quickly. You can see the level of engagement, how children flow, come in and out, and the whole time they are collaborating with this. And the scene can change quite a lot, and it's lovely to reflect back on the videos and pictures, and documented digitally now. Children instantly see what they've created, and it can move quite quickly. I found now that I'm not having to print off pictures, we can do an experience, it gets hooked up to a screen, and children can instantly, see what they've created. So that was the biggest thing I took away from the training, was just using what technology we already have and just using it in a smarter way.
This area where the stones group is our workshop area in the nursery. So we've just actually added a screen onto the wall in there, so that these videos that Romy's taken and all the photographs of the stones group are going to be played in that area, so the children can revisit that learning at any time.
Perfect, thank you, ladies. Yeah, it is a magical space, the workshop space, and many of our children access it. There's particular learning groups, but it's also freely access to all of the children in Menstrie ELC as well. And Lauren and Romy run that space, and you can tell by how they've spoke how dedicated they are to making these experiences really, really quality. I'm going to move on to talk a bit about Park ELC and how we have used this technology in our learning teaching practices. Here are a few of the apps that we have used to embed in our daily experiences. First, I'm going to have a look at our space group, and we've created a map. Many of you will be familiar with plan do review, and we took that concept as part of our mosaic approach to look at map do review. So this group of children wanted to create a space map, and they were looking at the map and they were seeing how that map represents their space in the ELC. So they used the iPads to create what they wanted to design the different planets to look like. They were very, very specific around the different features within the planets. They did a lot of research as to what features were in each planet and why it looked that way, why there were rings around Saturn, what colour was the water on Earth, and why did it look like that. Then they continued to develop and design their planets before they decided to physically make them. They used a lot of different resources to be able to create them. And again, they were very particular about what colours, what shapes, what sizes, what planet was the biggest, what planet was the smallest. They said in our solar system that the sun was the biggest in the solar system. So that was their group, and all the planets around it would be the different areas within the ELC. And as you can see, that's how the planet developed. And they used the apps to create little spacemen of themselves, so that when they were planning and putting themselves in a space, they themselves are an astronaut. This is our geodome, and this is in what we call now the space room. That was a regulation room. It was a sleep room. It was just one of those spaces in any kind of establishment that was an open space and that was used for different purposes. And this group well and truly took ownership of it. It started with the geodome being put on, and the children started to draw around it, and very quickly they started to look up and say, wow, this looks like the solar system. And then they started to kind of draw what the solar system would look like. They started to draw astronauts and different things on it. They started to walk around the space and look at themselves and how astronauts would move in space, and see themselves as astronauts. Then they started to use these coloured blocks to create a space station. And again, they were researching different types of space stations, and they were creating that to make sure that they had the right shapes and the right positions so that they could create their own spaceship station and what would be happening in each space of it. Room 2 were very literal with their concept of a map, and they wanted to make a real map. So they started to investigate what maps were, what maps looked like, different types of maps, and one of the children said that they used Google Maps to find out where they were going. So the children decided to go onto Google Maps and find their houses, find how they would travel from the ELC to their house. They used Google Maps to go on a walk around the community to find different spaces. And then they went on to start designing their map. So you can see, again, they used apps on the iPad to design what they wanted their map to look like, and you can see how well they have put that into fruition on their wall. They were very particular. They said maps have lines. They were very, very specific about it, and they wanted there to actually be maps and lines on the floor in the ELC. When we raised that might not be sustainable, that children walking on it, running on it, it might lift up the lines. We're thinking how we're going to paint lines on the floor without getting in trouble. They changed their minds to putting the map on the wall, thank goodness. And again, you can see here, one of the features that they created on the map was that the doors in the ELC open. So they weren't happy with just the doors being closed on the picture. So they insisted on creating doors that would open. And then when they did create the doors that would open, obviously it was just the wall behind the open door. So they said, well, no, through that door's a different room, through that door's outside. So the problem solved, and they put a picture behind the picture of the door, so when the door opens, it looks into the space that it would actually be going into. For the documentation of our map review, this particular group of children have used the Storymaker app to document what they've been doing with their learning after they've been choosing where they're going and what they've been doing. This is how they've been documenting how the impact of that. I'm just going to pause it because the sound is quite overlapping on that actually, and but each child has almost like a comic strip in the book, and they add to the comic strip. And what they're able to do is they're able to record their voice over it so that they can hear it, but they can also draw over it so they can kind of illustrate themselves, kind of, and document themselves what they've been doing that day. A lot of our children in this room in particular have got English as an additional language, so it's a really good tool for them to be able to be really independent in reviewing their own learning, and learning the skills they've been going on as well. Move on. Then we had a Lego map group. A Lego map group, again, that was just a huge interest for these children, and they started to look at the spaces within the ELC, so then they had to get designing. So we used the POC app to design what each space would look like through Lego shapes. The POC app allows the children to change the colour, change the shape. If they've done something they don't like, you can drag it over to this black circle that is at the side there, and then they can kind of change the shape again there. And they get to really be quite creative with it. And the great thing about this is that they were able to make what they wanted it to look like, and then they use these designs to create the shapes on their Lego map, as you can see here. So they decided what areas were what shapes, what Lego pieces they would need, so then they were ready to go and create in their Lego map. So as you can see here, the children were very independent in this. Again, the educators were there to support and scaffold that, but the children were very, very sure as to what they were doing and how they were going to do it. And you can see the development of that map here. And they themselves also, as well as the astronauts, they created little Lego people so they could put themselves beside the map, so they knew what they were going to do that day. We had, this is a wee illustration of a group who were beginning to choose what map they wanted to do. And again, just how we were using our iPads with the group to decide what map we were going to make. So the children here were using tally marks, and again, they were able to choose any colour that they were able to do. And you can see there's actually some very cool colours. It's very shiny, or there's rainbow. So the children absolutely loved this. And they just put a tally mark beside what map they wanted to do. And then from that, they were able to say, right, where's most tally marks and what map are we deciding? And from this group, they decided to make a dinosaur map. So much like the other groups, they used the Storymaker app to document this as well. And again, independently, they were documenting why they were choosing the dinosaur map. We also have our interactive maps. So there's one of these in Menstrie ELC as well. This is using the children's visual communication aids, their objects of reference, and it has voice record buttons as well to support children who have got additional support needs to be engaging in this map to review. This has been really, really beneficial for a lot of our children, not just with additional support needs, but our younger children as well. And they've been really responsive to this. So we've got the children's representations of what the areas look like, we've got their objects of reference, we've got their visual communications, and we've got voice buttons to all support that communication of that transition between the different areas in the ELC. And this is just around that consultation of what this map was to look like for these children. So a big part of that was using talking maps. So we were asking the children, what did they like, what did they not like, what areas did they want included in the map, because we were very sure that we didn't want to include all areas in the map because we felt that would be overstimulated. So we also used a lot of observation as well to see where were the children gravitating to most, and we picked those 4 areas, as well as using the talking maps for consultation around kind of creating that map as well. We have our castle learning group. So this came from the children were doing self-portraits, and they were looking at different artists who were making self-portraits, and they were seeing how they could interpret a self-portrait based on that artist. And actually what this group said was, that doesn't look like a self-portrait, that looks like a castle. And then the castle group grew. So they got designing using the POC app, if I can play here. They again were very particular around what they wanted the spaces to be for, what shapes, what colours, why it had to be that space. You know, the dining room had to be long, the bedroom had to be a specific size, there had to be little bits for toilets and, you know, different playrooms. They were very, very sure as to what they were doing, very independent as to what they were doing as well. And all of it was very purposeful. And from the design process, they got creating. So you can see here how they started to create their castle, and they kept going back to the design that they made. They used the colour blocks here as well, so you can see them, and they were very, very specific around what colours were where, and that was where it was based on their original design as well. And then we moved on to they wanted to create stories within their castles. It's a point here saying that actually we've continued on the learning from the castle groups, and they've begun to use the Google Maps and things as well to go walk around the community to Alwa Tower and to see different places within the community as well, and they've continued their learning down that route. But we used the Storymaker app to look at our literacy, and what this has actually done within the room is that we have a group of boys in particular who we really struggled to look at that reading aspect of literacy and getting them to create imaginative characters and look at the plot of a story and what might happen next. And what they've managed to do is that's brought a lot of these boys on board and to make their own stories and really think about what are who are the characters, what are they going to do, what's the main plot of the story, and what's going to be the resolution at the end of the story. And that's been great because they've always been capable, they've always been able, but providing them with the tools that are motivating for them, we're able to really see and extend that learning. Oh, I'm sorry, it keeps jumping again with the sound, but you can kind of see how they've been able to create their story. They've been able to dictate what's happening in each page. They had storyboards to plan this out before they put it into the app. So that created and supported the structure of the story, but then the app allowed for a lot of creativity and freedom around the colours, the characters. When it's nighttime, it's dark, and later in the story, there's a present, and then the present opens, and it is a very, very magical story. But what we've also been able to do is we've printed the stories off, and we're starting to make a library within that room. Of course, yes, absolutely, we can absolutely share the story separately, just for a little bit of joy. It is a great story. And yeah, we've printed the stories off, so we've got a library of the children's own stories in the space as well, which is really motivating and inspiring for the children. But we've been able to share the stories with the families as well. And that's been lovely because a lot of the feedback we've got is that they've been reading it as bedtime stories, or they've been playing them as bedtime stories, or they've been going at home and they've been creating stories at home as well, which is exactly what we want. We want learning to be happening everywhere in a children's life. So being able to get that family engagement has been wonderful. But thank you. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour around Park and Menstrie ELC's journey around digital technology and how we've been embedding it since we've been getting the wonderful training from Martin and Eva. But I'll hand it back over to you, Eva.
Thanks so much. That was amazing. So many wonderful experiences there. You know, the spaces that been set up in both settings are just so inspiring. But what everyone I'm sure noticed with your accounts there is the really effective interactions between members of staff and the children that was, you know, making it all happen. The children certainly know what they want to achieve. that came across really, really clear. But what also came across really, really nicely was that you respond, to their interests and you're meeting their needs so well. Love the time lapse for the process art. If I was back in settings myself, I would absolutely have that, going on everywhere now. The art area, the bricks, just absolutely everywhere. And a bit like what was happening there in Haddington, Helen and Kirsty were talking about. If the things that they're making is maybe more process rather than end product, or if they can't keep whatever it is they have produced, then they've always got that little memory there, in video footage to go.
Okay, now back to me just for the last few minutes. Let's think about loose parts. So we saw some lovely examples there. But did you know the loose parts theory was coined back in the 70s by an architect called Simon Nicholson? And if you have a wee look on the screen here, these are the different variables that he described as loose parts. It kind of developed the idea that movable materials that can be constructed and taken apart can create limitless possibilities for creativity. So let's think about some small pieces of digital technology in there, perhaps some of the simple battery-operated lights and talking buttons. How would that change how the children engage with the loose parts?
And what about when mirrors added there as well? The reflections with the light add another dimension to be explored. It doesn't have to be good quality mirror, even something that's a wee bit reflective, tinfoil perhaps, just enough to shine and reflect that light. We saw some of the materials just a wee minute ago, like the magnetic tiles, so things that are perspex that the light can shine through, and the light can create nice colourful projections and shadows. All different bits of material as well, material that maybe is reflective. I'm like a magpie now, anything that's scrappy, even if it's maybe a top that's had a wee sequins pocket, I'll be cutting all that off to keep it in my kit as well, because it's a great way for children to explore, how the light reacts with it. The one thing I would say there about the battery lights is just be mindful of things with button batteries, and what I've discovered is a lot of the little simple touch lights, the remote controls, have those sort of button batteries in them, so I would be keeping them well out the way, but you'll have all your risk assessments in place anyway, so you will be more than aware of that. So realising the ambition talks about unique learning spaces, so think about that on a physically large scale, and we saw that there, didn't we? We saw some wonderful examples there of the projections and the shadow play, and although it makes a really nice, interesting space, there's more to it than that. And you can see there from this quote, there's something in our brains, from when we're babies, that switches on with this multi-sensory stimulation. So if you think you find it interesting, imagine how the children are feeling. And then if we're thinking about placement of our bits and pieces as well, Helen mentioned the vertical Lego base plate up on the wall. Great, for encouraging some of your younger children, or some of your children maybe with mobility that need a wee bit of help with their mobility or their core strength. That's going to help them to stand up. So one thing is thinking about what resources you've got, then the next thing is about the placement of them. So some things you might have kind of for free play, children can transport them wherever they want, but some other things you might set up more intentionally if there's something that you're trying to support a child with. And it might be that we're thinking about fine motor skills, it might be gross motor skills. Again, there's a nice wee image there, an example of that vertical work going on there. Now I've popped the image credit on all the photos. If there's nothing on it, there'll be my own photos, but this one here is taking us to an American setting, Mulberry House. I very recently came across a lot of the work that they're doing across social media, and recently bought a book. So I'll link everything at the end, but there's some fantastic ideas in there. And this is a little sort of screen grab from the book, but this specific experience or space was set up to encourage children to work on strengthening that core muscle tone and the coordination. And it's a simple IKEA pegboard, but they've put light behind it. So that light is just opening up so many more, avenues for exploration. You can see there they've got magnets, and they've got some perspex, I think magnet tiles going on there, and a bit of tubing that's transparent as well. Now, similarly to what we've heard here from, I can't remember now if it was Park or Menstrie. A little example here, like a playscape. Just share my sound. And I told you earlier that I would forget to do that, didn't I? I did. Always forget to share my sound. Stop sharing, then reshare with sound. Think more small world, sort of imaginary play. So we have a simple suitcase. It could be a box, it could be a tray, it might just be on the floor in a corner. So the first example here is in relation to like little fairy doors and little fairies, but just have a wee look at the different bits and pieces, small tiny bits and pieces of technology that added interest here. So there's a talking button in there, and there's a recording of a mysterious sound. There's some metallic material, there's some sheer material, like your organza material, and there's a little colour change and light in there as well. So just adding that really interesting, intriguing dimension. Similar but dinosaur theme this time, and there was a projection, a moving projection there on the background, and it wasn't over anything fancy. There was no fancy screen. It was a white scarf, and you'll see actually the scarf's textured, because again, that's given another avenue to explore. Why is the projection or the video or the picture not completely flat? Why is there bumps in it? Well, what's it projecting on? So lots of opportunities for exploration there. So what could you use? So resources that you've already got. I see some lovely examples of rainbow torches, and it's simply a torch put inside a kitchen roll tube with some cling film over the end, and then the markers or the chalk pens over the top, over the cling film. And it doesn't have to be, stripes or spots or anything. It could almost be like these little torches that you buy, see over on the right there, that have the different sort of filters that go on top. That was just a wee Halloween torch out somewhere like B&M or Home Bargains or something like that. On the left, we have a DIY light box. So we've got a transparent box, like a tray with the lid, but inside the base is lined with tin foil, and then there are some lights inside. It might be the sort of push button lights, or it might be a strip of the LED lights, and then the underneath of the lid just has baking paper on it, or it might be crepe paper or tissue paper, but just something to give it that sort of opaqueness, but thin enough to let the light shine back through. Then that way you don't have to worry about plugs, things charging. It can go outside, the children can be part of making it, and if it does fall over and get cracked or broken, it's not a big upset like it would be if it was a proper light panel that costs a lot of money. So there's lots of things we can do to bring digital and non-digital things together. Lots of opportunities to explore how they can connect, how they can work well, how they can interact. Another little example here from Mulberry. So you can see the it's just your really everyday bits and pieces here. We've got lots of foil and reflective material, but see the light on the table? The light is what's making all the difference there. Have you ever tried having music playing, different genres of music or different soundscapes? what I'm seeing here, and I might be completely wrong, but I'm seeing like cold. I don't know if it's maybe like frosty pictures, you know, could we have like a howling wind or a sort of snowstorm sound playing in the background? You know, what would happen there? Would that extend? You know, would children be more deeply engaged, or would it sort of change the direction of what it was that we're working on? These little lights are fantastic. They're sort of marketed as what are they called again? Like mood lights. They can either plug in to a USB socket plug or like a battery pack. I would probably use the battery pack, or it can go into a laptop or something like that as well. But I would use a wee inexpensive battery pack so that it can be mobile. But it's such a lovely way for the children to be able to explore colour and shadow and colour mixing as well. So they're really worthwhile. I'm trying to think what they're called again. B&M Home Bargains, but they're sort of like ambient sunset lamps. That's what they're called, sunset lamps. And the idea is that you have it, you know, projecting on a corner in one of your rooms, you know, to project either warmth or cold, whatever I suppose you wanted. Colours, shapes, textures, translucency, space, you know, all of these things that we can use to, you know, reflect and project. You know, cogs, counters, twigs, leaves, stones. We saw that lovely example there of the items on the projector that was being projected up on the wall. You know, you can do that with, you might have a visualiser, you know, maybe one of the upper classrooms or maybe down in the assembly hall if you're part of a school, you might have a visualiser. So think about that, you know, even being projected onto one of your interactive panels if you happen to have one of them. Or even just on a bigger screen, because it, you know, they can then zoom in and they can see things in much more detail. And you can do it as well if you're a setting that maybe has iPads and you can screen mirror wirelessly up onto a panel. That's another great opportunity for being able to look into, you know, the finest details of things as well. And what about water and light? And I'll be honest, that's probably something I never really mixed together for obvious reasons, you know, but we now have things like waterproof torches, waterproof lights. This is like a little disco lamp projector. Not sure if this one was waterproof. This wasn't me. You'll see that the source there. It's another American setting, Kindaroo Akala. But they had the lights projecting on the water. It was a really great opportunity to discover refraction, because when the light was shining in, the light was bending, and as soon as I saw that I thought, oh, imagine a bubble machine in there too, with the light shine on the bubbles, you know, then the bubbles would land on the water. So loads of examples. Okay, so just before we come to a couple of practical tips, I just wanted to share another two images here. So we spoke about QR codes a wee while ago, the settings that were on presenting. And I don't know why, but when I was a practitioner, the QR code content was always external, you know, always took you somewhere else. So, for example, at the building site, it would have been, you know, a video of a building site. But in this setting, like yourselves, the content was all back to the children. So it was the children, you know, showing how to build, and it was the children, you know, inspiring other groups of children to join in, and a great opportunity for revisiting learning as well. So this is really important, and I say this all the time when we're doing our Digital Schools Award sessions. It's a considered approach to technology, isn't it? It's not all singing, all dancing technology. And I think that this is really important about it integrating. You know, it's helping join the dots, or it's helping bridge between imagination and the real world. And we mentioned that at the start. And I absolutely love the quote from Loris Malaguzzi, who spoke about the space, the physical space, and the space has to be a sort of aquarium that mirrors the ideas, values, attitudes, and cultures of the people that live in it. I thought that really resonates with, you know, working with younger children with technology, doesn't it? So, balance, and I hope you like what I've done here with the digital and the analogue scale here. For some children, you know, depending on their needs, some parts of technology or digital technology, they might find it overstimulating. So depending on, you know, how your setting is set up, or, you know, who's using the spaces at whatever time, there might be times where you take things away or switch things off or take things down, you know, background noise, pitch sensitivities, there's all of that. And yesterday I saw actually a much better visual example of a tightrope. So it was Shan from the ELC team was presenting something, and she says, rather than it being, you know, the 50-50 balance, think of it more as a tightrope, because it might be a wee bit here, it might be a wee bit there, and it all changes, you know, depending on the variables of the day, the variables of the children and their needs. Okay, so one thing that you might come across when you talk about digital technology and maybe using the projections or the panels, you might get a bit of worry or a bit of concern from some of your families, and you know that's pretty normal considering how screen time is portrayed in the media. But what we want to do is offer some really sort of realistic support, making sure that, you know, they're fully understanding what it is we're doing in our settings. So for example, a panel or a projection is certainly not showing, you know, films on Netflix, but it might be a time-lapse video of what the children were doing earlier that day. So it's making sure that they're fully understanding, you know, what the technology is being used for, and then supporting them, you know, leading them to sort of little links and things like this that can help them then make sort of better informed decisions themselves. So it's not about banning, but it's about the balance, and you know, not all screen time's equal, it's the content that's on it. So I will leave all these links with you. Another really interesting read, and a really simple, useful, you know, just to the point, from the Frobel Trust. There's a research highlight here on young children and digital technology. And what it's highlighting is that, you know, it's not to be a passive experience. And like we've saw from the 2-3 inputs that we've had today, it absolutely is not. So it's all about that communication and that interaction that we do all the time, you know, in any experience that the children have in our settings, but just another useful one for sharing with parents and carers. Now, I'm not sure if we mentioned it tonight. I don't think we did. We may have tinker tables, tinker trays. If that's something that you're offering, which is, you know, a great opportunity for learning, finding out what's inside, what makes things work. You know, technology doesn't just happen by magic. There are components inside that, you know, make it move, make it do something, light up, make a sound. And a lot of the time, you know, we might collect old mobile phones, you know, old pieces of electrical equipment and things like that. But again, just do that with caution. And I would like to draw your attention to this really, really useful guide from CERC. So it's part of one of their primary bulletins, and they have like a special edition where they have a really clear set of guidelines for risk assessing, but they've also got a little video there too, so it's one that you could have on and, you know, watch with the children. So I'll just tell you the sort of things to avoid, you know, things that might burn and so on. A few things we mentioned earlier about sound effects and, you know, projections. It's all very different for every local authority as to what you've got access to. So some of you will be coming in perhaps through Glow, and you might have access to things like Adobe Express. Some of you might be independent and you might not have access to things like that at all. So a couple of places that you might want to check out. Pixabay for your images and your moving sort of backgrounds. You can do a search, lots of different filters, and you can then decide, you know, what type it is you want, but what you're looking for is one with Creative Commons, you know, so that you can use it freely. And the same with BBC sound effects, so the little fairy sound and the dinosaur sound, which was actually a wild boar, but the children didn't know that, but we didn't have a dinosaur sound on the BBC sound effects library, but the wild boar worked pretty well, and they agreed that, you know, it sounded like a dinosaur. So that's another place that you can go to get your audios. So they were just simply recorded onto a talking button. And then just a little bit there about why that's important. So you're keeping yourself right, you're being legal, you're being a responsible citizen. And then just a couple of links that I'll leave you with if you do want to learn a wee bit more. So we mentioned Nikki Buchan and her wonderful input, and we've got a recording with that session. We spoke a bit about Mulberry House and the different things that I'm seeing going on there. And then there's just a few more links there if this is something that you're really interested in, to find out a wee bit more about that. And then support from our team can be found on the DigiLem Scott blog. So all the links are on the slide notes, and you are welcome to reuse these slides if you want to share things with your colleagues. You are more than welcome to do that. Quick plug for a couple of things that we've got coming up. 3rd of February, we're having a sort of pre-Safer Internet Day session, so that's coming up on the 10th of February, but we're going to do sort of the week before it, or 2 weeks before it, a little sort of intro session on how you can get involved and what resources are out there that are appropriate for early and first level. And it won't just be the Safer Internet Day ones, there's a couple of others that we would use. And then later on, we have an event called Cyber Scotland Week coming up. You might have heard of this before. Its sort of main aim is to help basically all of Scotland's people become more cyber resilient, but we can take part, we can start raising awareness of, why this is important from early level. And if you come along to these sessions, you'll find out how you can do that. And then later on again, and I've not popped it in the slides, we have some read-along sessions for children with the Bongles and the Crafty Crows that looks at cybersecurity and passwords and passcodes in particular. So once again, just a huge big thank you to everybody that joined us tonight to present. Your input has been invaluable, and I'm sure all the attendees on the session tonight would agree. So thank you so much, and thank you to the attendees for joining, especially you that have stayed till the very end. So thank you. And then we have an evaluation, of course. I will send this out to you, so don't worry about doing it just now. We've ran over time anyway, but I will send it out to you tomorrow in an email. So whatever email you use to sign up to the session, that's when I'll contact you with, or via tomorrow. I'll send you the slides with all the presenter notes, all the links, and the recording as well. So you'll have that all tomorrow. So I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I know that I have absolutely loved it. With settings, I just wish I could go there like tomorrow and go and see it myself now and have a wee play, but I'm sure it'll have left you feeling really, really inspired. So thanks so much, everyone, and I'll stop the recording again in case anyone has another question.